Bonjour tout le monde! We moved to Europe. My husband and I each moved with one suitcase, a carry-on suitcase, and a backpack. Nothing was shipped. I'm telling you this so you understand how we made it here with the items I brought listed in this video. All packed in suitcases. We are starting our adventure in France. Yep, the land of croissants, baguettes, and everything buttery and beautiful. Now, since you know I love to bake, you might be wondering, what would a home baker ever need to take to France? After all, France is the land of exquisite food and pastries, right? I mean, isn't that like bringing sand to the beach? Well, yes and no. My answer might surprise you. Last fall, Scott and I visited a couple of different cities in France on a scouting trip. And of course, we hit every grocery store, market, and kitchen shop we could find. We wanted to see what they had and what they didn't. And here's what we discovered. While the French are amazing bakers, the average French person doesn't really bake much at home. Granted, there are home bakers, but the average person, not so much. In general, and rightly so, the French leave baking to the pros. Why heat up your kitchen, likely a small kitchen, when you only need to walk a block or two and buy a fresh baguette or pastry made by someone who's trained for years to perfect it? And it's super cheap. Our baguettes are usually between 50 and 75 cents each, so that's hard to beat when you bake it from scratch at home. Now, don't get me wrong. We've definitely been buying plenty of bread and pastry since we've been here. But sometimes we want that taste of home. So today I'm sharing a few ingredients and tools I decided to bring with me in what little space we had that we aren't easily able to find in France or that aren't quite as affordable. And I'm sharing a couple of items I was going to pack but decided to leave behind and why. Let's dive in. The first ingredient I decided to pack is double acting baking powder. This one's a must, at least for me. In France, stores sell single-acting baking powder called levure chimique. Single-acting basically just means there's only one acid that reacts immediately in contact with liquid. Double-acting baking powder found in the US contains two acids, one that reacts immediately in contact with liquid and the other reacts during baking, thus providing two rises. Now, this is a topic for another video that I'll dive into later. We just need to know that baking powder does exist in France, but it may require increasing the amount or altering when to add it, thus potentially altering the flavor and rise of a bake. For my weekly bake of Southern American biscuits, I really want that double acting lift without compromising the taste. I'll play around with the French single acting version later and perhaps create a comparison video for you. But for now, I have my trusty double acting stash to start. The second ingredient I decided to pack is chili powder. Okay, so this one's for my Tex-Mex cravings and meals. In the US, chili powder is a blend of herbs and spices that are smoky, spicy, and rich. On our scouting trip to France, I only saw chili listed in the ingredients on a chili powder bottle. No depth, no blend, no heat. However, since we've been in France for several months, I now can say we've seen Tex-Mex packets and bottles of Mexican spice. I'll have to test it against the US version and see how it compares, but for now, yeah, I brought my own. The third ingredient I decided to pack is yeast. You guys know I bake a couple of loaves of bread every week, at least I did in the US. So I used to buy this big bag of yeast from my local warehouse club, way cheaper than smaller versions. This 2-pound package was $6. In France, you can certainly find tiny packets, which can become expensive over time if you're buying multiple packets a week. I even found a small can of yeast in the international aisle of a large grocery store. However, I haven't seen this size in smaller stores. The price breaks down to 1.1 pounds of yeast for €7, which is equal to the current exchange rate at $8.14. So for the same amount of yeast comparison, the price difference is about $3 per pound in the US versus near $8 per pound in France, if you can find a larger size. So yes, my giant bag of yeast came with me. The fourth ingredient I planned to pack but didn't, is vegetable shortening. This one I chose not to bring at the last minute. I may regret it as the seasons change, but I have a solution. I generally only use shortening for my grandma's pie crust and cookies, like my chocolate chip cookies, among others, but I don't make those very often. Butter, margarine, and oil are the go-to fats in France for cooking and baking, not shortening. In fact, I haven't seen vegetable shortening at all since we've been here. Curious though, I looked for shortening online at both a common retail grocery chain in the US and on Amazon.fr for France. Check out these price differences. The US price for the common brand name is $8.99 for 3 pounds, which equals out to $2.99 per pound. The price for the same product in France, because there's no other brand, is 32 euros and 29 cents for 3 pounds, which equals out to 10 euros 76 per pound, which is $12.51 per pound. Okay, that was a lot to process. So let's recap those final numbers. In the US, shortening can be $2.99 per pound. In France, shortening is $12.51 per pound. That's more than 4 times the amount in France compared to the US. Since I chose not to bring shortening with me, my temporary vegetable shortening solution is a solid coconut oil. There are plenty of affordable jars in France, and once softened, it can resemble vegetable shortening. We'll find out with future bakes how true that is though. But for now, I left vegetable shortening behind. Besides, vegetable shortening isn't that healthy for you anyway. Perhaps on my next trip back to the US, I might sneak in a few shortening sticks in my suitcase. Now let's talk tools. The first tool or tools I decided to pack are glass measuring cups. Yes, I know, these are not light items. Even though I weigh most ingredients and food scales are easy to find in France, sometimes I just want to measure liquid or heat up liquid in a glass measuring cup. I'm not a fan of heating up plastic in a microwave. Besides, my grandma's recipes are in cup measurements, not grams or milliliters, as the European larger measuring cups show. Glass measuring cups are harder to find in France. Plastic ones, sure, but glass and in US customary units, not so much. So for me, in the suitcase they went. The second tool or tools I decided to pack are my German steel knives. I know, they're European, but this isn't about where they're made. It's about how they feel, and they are personal. Once you find knives that fit perfectly in your hand, if you will, and they become an extension of your being, you don't leave them behind, at least not me. They are such a part of me as a baker and cook. I can't imagine finding anything else better. So after battling dull Airbnb knives on past trips and not having proper knives available, I decided they had to come with me. And I have been super happy that I brought them. So now this leads me to the last tool or tools, what I didn't bring and why. I chose not to bring individual measuring cups and spoons. When I lived in France years ago, they were impossible to find. Recipes would read and still read to add a spoonful of sugar. And I'd be like, okay, but which spoon? Even if a recipe says a teaspoon, what about a quarter teaspoon or 1/8 of a teaspoon? In baking, accuracy is imperative. But times have changed. Thanks to more Americans living abroad and the popularity of baking shows, you can find measuring cups and spoons in kitchen stores or on Amazon.fr with US customary units. So I gave mine to a friend, and I'll buy new ones when I decide I need them. So that's my list, my Little Baker's Survival Kit for Europe. We've actually found most everything else we need in one of the local grocery stores or online through Amazon.fr. I'm sure there will be other ingredients that pop up, like molasses or maple syrup, for example, that may be more challenging to find. But for now, this is it. Everyone's list will look different, but these are my comfort items, the ones that'll make my initial bakes and initial months of living abroad feel a little more like home. Thank you so much for watching, liking, and subscribing. Until next time, maybe think about your non-negotiables in the kitchen and join me in baking the world.